In the annals of American crime, few figures provoke such a visceral reaction as Krista Pike. She holds a grim distinction, the youngest woman in the United States to be sentenced to death since the reintroduction of capital punishment, a chilling precedent set when she was a mere 18 years old. The jury, in delivering their verdict, grappled with an image so contradictory, so inherently perverse, that it became the defining description of her very being. A face of an angel, they declared, harboring the heart of a devil. Whispers followed her, tales of her callousness, of how she would casually pick up fragments of a human skull, treating them as macabre trophies, displaying them to others without the slightest flicker of an eyelid, devoid of remorse or even a hint of disquiet. Even confined within the cold, unforgiving embrace of prison bars, the passage of time did little to temper her cruelty. She remained unrepentant, continuing her reign of terror, her offenses reaching beyond the confines of her initial crime, manifesting within the very walls designed to contain her. Some speculate that she was born a vessel for pure evil, a natural aberration, an embodiment of malevolence from the moment of her first breath. Others, however, cling to the more unsettling belief that it was the cruel machinations of life, a series of tumultuous events that meticulously chiseled away at her humanity, pushing her, piece by agonizing piece, into the abyss of depravity, transforming her into the monster she ultimately became. The idyllic tranquility of Knoxville, Tennessee, was shattered on the crisp morning of May 13, 1995. The sprawling campus of the University of Tennessee lay hushed, wrapped in the serene silence that precedes the dawn of a new day. Allen, a seasoned sanitation worker, began his usual rounds in Tyson Park, a secluded patch of verdant woodland nestled conveniently close to the university grounds. He considered himself fortunate, relishing the solitude of his designated area. The park was typically deserted during these early hours, a peaceful haven where few dared to tread, promising a lighter workload, an easier start to his day. But the universe, in its cruel irony, had other plans. Allen could never have imagined that within mere minutes, his perception of a quiet morning would be irrevocably twisted, replaced by a sight that would haunt his waking hours and infest his deepest slumber for the rest of his life. As he moved through the dew-kissed grass, his eyes, accustomed to spotting the misplaced litter of a careless night, snagged on an anomaly. Amidst the damp earth, a stark, crimson stain bloomed, a blotch of unnatural color against the natural greens and browns. It was not a single isolated patch, but a disturbing trail of diluted red, stretching like a macabre whisper, fading into the dense, tangled undergrowth of thick bushes. An icy finger of dread traced its way down his spine. His gut screamed, a primal alarm blaring a warning of something terribly wrong, fundamentally amiss. Yet a morbid curiosity, a perverse human need to understand the horror it senses, propelled him forward. Hesitantly, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, he parted the layers of foliage, pushing aside the heavy, dew-laden leaves. The sight that greeted him stole the very air from his lungs, his heart seizing in a moment of visceral terror. Before him, sprawled on the earth, was a body. It was no longer whole. The victim's form was a canvas of unimaginable brutality, covered in a meticulously patterned array of small, uniform cuts. They crisscrossed the skin with a chilling precision, as if a razor-thin blade had been wielded with deliberate, agonizing slowness, each incision a testament to a methodical, almost artistic cruelty. Stark against the pale flesh of the chest, a five-pointed star had been deeply carved, its points tearing into the very tissue beneath. But it was the head that truly defied comprehension. It was utterly, grotesquely crushed, reduced to an unrecognizable pulp of bone and flesh, a testament to an impact so savage that it obliterated any semblance of human identity. Alan's carefully cultivated composure evaporated instantly, replaced by a tide of pure, unadulterated panic. He scrambled backward, a guttural cry tearing from his throat, stumbling wildly from the forest. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he fumbled for his radio, his voice a ragged whisper as he stammered out the words, calling for the police, his world irrevocably altered. When the first responders arrived, the seasoned officers, men and women hardened by years of confronting the darkest aspects of human nature, stood in stunned silence. The sheer savagery of the scene surpassed even their most jaded expectations. It was a level of brutality that defied logic, a monstrous act that ripped through the very fabric of their understanding. Law enforcement quickly determined the victim was a young woman, and given the proximity to the university campus, their immediate suspicion was that she might be a student. The investigation, a grim procession of questions and observations, soon led them to the campus dormitories. An administrator, her face etched with concern, informed them that the previous evening, a 19-year-old student named Colleen Slemmer had departed the dorms in the company of 3 others, Krista Pike, Tadaro Schick, and Shadola Peterson. Only 3 had returned. Colleen Slemmer was, by all accounts, a gentle soul, a young woman with a quiet resolve. She was enrolled in a vocational training program sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor, a path chosen not out of preference for trades over academia, but out of necessity. Her family struggled, making a traditional university education an unattainable dream. Colleen's ambition was modest, yet profound. She dreamed of becoming a computer specialist, a stable career that would allow her to rise above her circumstances and provide for her loved ones. No one, absolutely no one, could have foreseen that within the span of a single night, that quiet dream would be violently extinguished, her aspirations brought to a horrifying, abrupt end by a tragedy born of unspeakable malice. As police continued their canvass, a university security guard approached the investigating officers, carrying a jacket that had been found discarded near the dorms. It belonged to Krista Pike. A flicker of intuition, or perhaps a practiced cynicism, led an officer to check the pockets. Inside, nestled amongst lint and forgotten detritus, they discovered a small bone fragment, carefully wrapped in a piece of tissue paper, still bearing traces of dried, dark blood. Initial forensic analysis would later confirm their deepest fears. It was a fragment of a human skull. Concurrently, another female student came forward with a chilling account. She reported that earlier that very morning, Krista had casually pointed to a reddish stain on her shoe, her voice devoid of any emotion as she declared, "That's not mud, that's blood." Then, with an unnerving calm, Krista had proceeded to recount in graphic, meticulous detail how she had cut her rival's throat and crushed her head with a rock. The pieces, horrifying and disjointed, were beginning to fall into place, drawing a terrifying portrait of a killer. The investigators now had not just a body, but a name and suspects. What they began to uncover was a twisted tale of obsession and dark faith that would send shivers down the spines of even the most hardened officers. Krista Pike, it was learned, had met Tadaro Schick in 1994 during the same vocational training program Colleen Slemmer was enrolled in. The two quickly formed an intense bond, united by a disturbing shared belief: Satanism. They subscribed to the idea that evil was the ultimate power, a force to be worshipped and harnessed. When Krista had to return home for a break, Tadaro, left alone, began to spend time with Colleen. Their relationship, by all accounts, was purely platonic, a simple friendship. But in Krista's warped mind, this was an unforgivable betrayal. Her jealousy, a corrosive acid, began to consume her. What started as threats soon escalated into a dark, unyielding resolve to punish her perceived rival. Krista became convinced that the universe itself was out of balance and that only the sacrifice of a soul could restore order. In her delusional, twisted faith, she chose Colleen as the unwitting offering to the devil. The stage was set for a night of unimaginable horror. On the evening of January 12, 1995, just 4 months before Colleen's body would be discovered, Krista, feigning reconciliation, invited Colleen to Tyson Park. Tadero and Shadola Peterson were also there, under the pretense of smoking pot and talking things out. Naively, Colleen trusted them, walking willingly into the moonlit woods with her supposed friends. Deep within the park's secluded embrace, Krista abruptly turned to Colleen, her eyes as cold and hard as steel. "Why," she demanded, "did you dare to seduce my boyfriend?" Colleen, bewildered and frightened, denied the accusation. But Krista was beyond reason. She lunged forward, grabbing Colleen by the hair, slamming her head against the damp earth. The assault was instant and brutal. Colleen cried out, pleading, "Please, leave me alone, I didn't do anything." But her desperate pleas only seemed to fuel Krista's manic frenzy. She pulled out a knife, a thin, sharp blade, and began to cut. First, a shallow slice across Colleen's neck. Then, with chilling precision, she carved a deep, 5-pointed star into the flesh of Colleen's chest. All the while, Tadero, the very boyfriend Krista claimed to love, stood by, then actively participated, picking up a rock and bringing it down with crushing force onto Colleen's head. Blood splattered, staining the ground a grotesque crimson. When the horrific ordeal finally ended, Krista, in a final act of desecration, cut a piece of Colleen's skull, wrapping it carefully like a prized trophy. The 3 perpetrators then dragged the lifeless body into the dense undergrowth before calmly returning to their dorms, behaving as if nothing had happened. The morning after the grim discovery, when police knocked on Krista's door, she greeted them with an unsettling calm, even a faint smile. Inside her room, investigators found chilling evidence: a satanic Bible, a pair of blood-stained pants, and, horrifyingly, the fragment of human skull bone that perfectly matched Colleen Slimmer's remains. At the interrogation room, Krista Pike recounted the entire murder in gruesome, meticulous detail. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, not a trace of remorse. The transcript of her confession spanned a staggering 46 pages. It was a chilling window into a mind utterly devoid of empathy, a heart consumed by darkness. Krista Pike was subsequently found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to death by electric chair, making her the youngest woman to be sent to death row in the United States since the reinstatement of capital punishment in 1976. She was just 18 years old at the time. Tadderil Shipp, then 17, received a life sentence for his role in the murder. Shadola Peterson, who cooperated with the investigation, was sentenced to just over a year in prison, followed by 6 years of probation. Even behind bars, Krista Pike remained unrepentant. In letters to a boyfriend she later acquired in prison, she wrote that the police should thank her for making it quick so Colleen didn't suffer longer. In 1997, a man named Eric Gein, obsessed with true crime and death row inmates, began corresponding with Krista. He then started auctioning off her personal items: strands of hair, photographs, handwritten letters, even her underwear. A signed photo of Krista, accompanied by a lock of her hair, once sold for $135. Gein believed that one day she would be executed, and all these macabre mementos would become priceless. But he was wrong. Years turned into decades. Krista Pike is still alive today, still possessing that angelic face, but inside, a soul forever possessed by demons.